Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. In today's video, I'm going to be predicting the Perry versus Rockhold fight. If you are new around here, then you haven't subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do need like the video, and let's get straight into it. So, this is the first ever bare knuckle fight prediction for me, and I think it is the best card to start it off on. Probably, arguably the biggest bare knuckle card ever. Probably sales wise, it is, and I think that the way that bare knuckle boxing is going, I'm still new to the sport as well, so I don't know everything about the sport yet, and I'm still learning, I'm still watching how it's different and how it does differ to other variations of martial arts, I suppose, and it is very entertaining. I think that entertainment factor is something which is gonna drive people to the sport, and of course, it is very aggressive. Yeah, that's to say the least. You have to be a bit crazy in the head, I suppose, to be able to do it. I mean, some of the fighters in just MMA in general and boxing in general are a bit mad, like, but to be able to do what they do, but to be able to do this, it's on another level. This is like, obviously, I wouldn't say it's as stupid as doing something as like slap boxing. It's not even boxing, slap fighting, because that's stupid. But there's still an element of like the craft in it, I suppose, but it is just a lot more aggressive. And the whole way it's set up, I mean, before we even get into talking about the fights, just to have these names on this card, it shows probably the amount of money in the sport. It seemingly these fighters are getting paid quite a lot, and I mean, it's fair enough. You're gonna want a lot when you're fighting bare knuckle, like crazily aggressive fights, and it seems like they are going to be getting paid a lot. So I'm sure other UFC fighters will be coming over. I don't think there is any main stars at the moment. I think like that's why this is probably the biggest card so far, because it's got big names, but they're people who have made their big names from the UFC, and I think it is good though. That's how I believe a lot of these kind of organizations. That's how you say it. I don't know why I couldn't say that. How they start, because they start off with a couple big names surrounding the sport and surrounding the company, and then it builds up, and then they get their own stars growing into it. And I mean, it's happening with PFL at the moment. You're getting people like Jake Paul talking about it, and that's raising the platform of it, and soon there is going to be like a huge name that comes through, and that's just going to change it like mad and make the eyes even more on it than there already is, because now there is quite a lot of eyes on PFL, and it's a similar kind of thing to this. And yeah, I mean, the whole way it's set up, it's very American. I mean, I know it comes over to England, and a lot of the fights are in England, but yeah, of course it is very American. But yeah, let's speak about the fight. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to speak about the co-main, kind of give like a full prediction for that, and then a prediction for the main, because I think these two fights are very entertaining, very good fights, and I feel like might as well just talk about them both. And I was also having quite a lot of fun researching these fights, because I got to go watch old bare knuckle fights as well as old UFC fights, so it's a win-win for me. But yeah, so we're going to start off with the co-main, and that is Alvarez versus Mendes, which I think could obviously it hasn't got that rivalry, I suppose, behind it, but I think this, stylistic wise, could be a better competition in my opinion. So Alvarez was 30-8 with 18 KOs and 6 submissions in MMA, and Alvarez is making his bare knuckle debut. Mendes was 18-5 with 8 KOs and 2 submissions in MMA, and Mendes is 1-0 with 1 KO in bare knuckle. Alvarez's last fight was a loss via unanimous decision versus OK, and Mendes' last fight was a win via TKO in round 4 versus Famez. Alvarez has won 1 of his last 5 fights. I mean, that's why he's, I believe, retired now from MMA and is now coming over here, because obviously he gets a lot of money, but I think he is kind of past his time in MMA, and that's completely understandable. Of course, a lot of fighters get to that point where it is better to retire. Alvarez is the former UFC lightweight champion, of course, in his prime. What a fighter, crazy good fighter. Of course, did suffer that big loss versus Conor McGregor, but other than that, when he beat Dos Anjos, that was a very, very impressive victory and was why he was the champion, and a big belt at a big time in the sport, and is coming from a big time in the sport. All of these fighters were in the UFC around a similar time, and it was a very tough time to be in the UFC. I mean, I imagine there's not really been an easy time to be in the UFC, but it was a very entertaining time to be in the UFC. That was. Mendes had 3 UFC title fights. All of them ended with losses against Aldo twice and McGregor. Mendes fights off the back foot, lines up huge shots, and is very explosive. I'd say Alvarez is similar, but I think he probably, in my opinion, fights more with his combinations when he does get into the range, and he does fight, but they're similar height and, well, from what I believe, and similar kind of fighting off the back foot style, which is something a bit different for bare knuckle, because from what you've seen, or from what I've seen so far in bare knuckle, because they start on that start line, and just in general, I suppose the whole sport, they'll just like run at each other, and there's not really too much thinking out process, which I do like, and it does make it more interesting. But I think that the fact that they are both kind of fighters that like to fight off the back foot, it's gonna be interesting to see who will land the first bigger punch and how people will react to that. Maybe not people, but how these people will react to it. And I mean, I think Mendes is probably the more powerful and the, of course, like I said, more explosive when he comes in. It is wild, but it is very impressive. But Alvarez does have good movement, and I think that's something that he can help with. And obviously his movement's probably not as what he used to be, but it was very good in his day, and if he can go back to that, then there's something there. But I think Alvarez was probably had more of a threat of that takedown and was good with that takedown, and maybe was a little bit less of a striker at times. He was still a very good striker, but I think he also had other threats as well, compared to Mendes, who I thought was probably a dominant, like just a striker really. Mendes is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Alvarez will win via unanimous decision. I think he's going to have to dodge some absolute missiles coming from Mendes, and I think it's going to be a very entertaining fight. But I think that Alvarez, if he can, it's weird to say like outbox him, but I don't really think I've seen that so far in bare knuckle. But I think if he can land his own combinations, assert himself, but be technical and be smart about it, not overcommit like Mendes does, then I think Alvarez will be able to win that one. So now moving on to the main event, Perry versus Rockhold. In press conferences been very entertaining for this one. I think that has, of course, helped sell the fight twofold, and Perry is a very entertaining guy, and I mean, they've also got Chael Sonnen involved, who I'm sure is getting paid a lot as well, but is also a very entertaining guy. Wouldn't surprise me if he gets involved in bare knuckle. Don't know if he will, but he would be a fun guy to have in bare knuckle. But the whole kind of build up of it has been very entertaining. And so Perry was 14-8 with 11 KOs and no submissions in MMA. Perry is now 3-0 with 0 KOs in bare knuckle. And Rockhold was 16-6 with 6 KOs and 8 submissions in MMA. And Rockhold is making his bare knuckle debut. Perry's last fight was a win via split decision versus Page, and Rockhold's last fight was a loss via unanimous decision in versus Costa in the UFC. Only recently that fight went down between Rockhold and Costa. I think Rockhold's the most recent one to retire from the UFC, from what I believe. Perry, probably his last fight was probably the biggest event before this from the bare knuckle. It shows how much of a draw he is, and that his name can make fights, and that Page fight was a very entertaining fight. I mean, of course, it went to the 6th round out of a 5-round fight, which I do quite like. It's obviously a very, I suppose, Americanized thing of it, where it's like golden goal, like kind of thing. It's like last round, give it your all, like. But they did give it their all, and it makes it just that little bit more entertaining, because you're just not going to see a draw, and I like it. I don't hate it. I like it. I probably wouldn't like it if it was in like boxing or UFC, but I think with something like bare knuckle, it kind of fits, and it's kind of justified. And Yeah, like I said, I don't hate it. I quite like it. Rockhold as well has also only won one of his last 5 fights. Of course, now coming off his retirement from the UFC, and Rockhold is the former UFC middleweight champion. Of course, in his day as well, was in a very tough middleweight division. He did win the belt, then he lost, I believe, straight away, like Alvarez did, via KO vs Bisping, if I'm right in saying. Um, Perry has never had a title fight, and so he's probably never. You can't really say he's never faced this amount of pressure before, because I'm sure he has. Like, and I'm sure he's faced and been in front of loads of these, like, this fan base is just because he is that draw. Like, I think he's used to it, and I don't think that anything like that will get to him. Um, Perry has the dog in him. That's simple as that. He has the dog in him. He's aggressive. He's very aggressive. He's always going to be coming forwards. He will give it his all. He probably isn't conditioned as amazingly, but he has got a dog in him. He'll pressure you. He'll always be in front of you. He'll land big punches as well. I think Rockhold recently hasn't shown the best of a chin. It was tested against Costa. He did look absolutely exhausted after the first round versus Costa. He didn't look great versus Costa. He gave it his all as well, so that's why I think this will be a good fight. But I don't know if he's too much suited to this. I don't know. I'm sure he is, because the way that he was fighting versus versus Costa, he did give it his all, and I felt like you have to in bare knuckle, and he did go through a lot in that fight, and so he has been in these deep waters, and even recently been in these deep waters, and so of course he's used to it as well. But I would say his chin's probably not what it used to be. Rockhold is of course the taller guy, and quite a bit taller, if I'm right in saying. I might be wrong, but I think it is quite a bit. So Perry, I'm sure he's used to that now, and I mean, Page was taller than him, and he managed to win that. It was a very close fight, but he managed to win that, just from his raw grit and determination. And so maybe he could do the same here. You never know. Perry is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Perry will win via KO in round 2. I think he will get his first stoppage in bare knuckle. I think that Rockhold, like I said, I don't think his chin what he's used to be. I think Perry has just got so much raw bare knuckle ability. I think this sport, like he said, is made for him. He said that in a press conference. This sport is made for him to an extent, and I think his grit, his determination, I don't think Rockhold has that right now. Obviously, he did go for a war versus Costa, but he just was knackered, and he just didn't look amazing. He was just throwing whatever he could throw left, and I respect that, but I think that Perry will just be able to capitalise on that, and I think he'll be able to hurt him. And I think with the no gloves, of course, Rockhold fighting for the first time in bare knuckle, I think that he'll have to get used to something like that, and I don't think you can spar too much for bare knuckle to prepare for it. I think you have to get in there. I think that is the best preparation, and it's a tough test against Perry, and I think Perry will win, like I said, via KO in round 2. And I wouldn't hate, with the current state of bare knuckle, because there's not that many big fighters around in it at the moment, I wouldn't hate if this would be like a tournament type format. Obviously, there's weight differences and quite big weight differences and stuff like that, but I mean, if Alvarez wants to face Perry's smaller guy, could happen. I don't know how much Mendes versus Rocco would happen, because I think there probably would be a big weight gap there, but never know, it could happen. And like I said, I don't think there's many big draws, so if they want to do that kind of tournament like format, I'm sure it could work, and I'm sure would sell again a lot. I think, like I said, I think a lot of other UFC fighters will be coming over here, just because big paychecks, entertaining fights can sell out a lot, and overall, just, I suppose, if you're up for it, if you've got the mindset for it, then why not? And yeah, I'm sure we'll see a lot more coming from this sport, and I can't wait. And yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you need, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.